Hi, my name's Valerie Parente, and I'm reading from my poetry book, The Artist, the Muse. I did start doing a video, and then my camera ran out of space, so I had to delete some stuff, and I'm starting over. So I apologize if it sounds a little scripted. It's because I'm going to go back and reiterate what I already said in the first video that didn't save. So the first poem that I want to read is called Daydreams Are Shadows. And just a little background, this poem, this one right here, that's the artwork. This poem I wrote, and it was the first poem I read at a poetry slam. So it's a little near and dear to my heart. It was when I was in college, my English professor wanted me to go to this poetry reading and read some of my work. So this is the piece that I chose to read. And it was a big deal because for a very long time, prior to college, when I was in high school, and probably the first year into college, I refused to read my writing to people because I was very paranoid about other people stealing it, which is so stupid. Like, I was a high school kid, who cares? Nobody cares about what you're writing in high school. So then it was a big deal when I actually read this out at the poetry slam, because it was the first time I was really like bringing my mind to and putting it on display for people. And this was back in, I think, 2015 or 2014. 2015, I'm pretty sure. All right, so daydreams are shadows. Daydreams are shadows. They linger, they follow. To exist, a glimmer of hope has to shine down in order to cast a sincere outline whose unique shape derives from that which occupies space and reality. They are projections captured between all we are made up of and a guiding light above. No matter how much we may want to reach out and physically touch them, they will always remain intangible entities that can only be felt with the imagination we each have. So Daydreams Are Shadows is a metaphor comparing daydreams to shadows. Surprise, surprise. And it was a thought that I had because I, growing up as a teenager and early adolescence, was basically a chronic daydreamer. I was constantly having these fantasies and dialogues going through my head and characters that I was developing in my head. So eventually I started to write those things down. I almost always had a scrap piece of paper near me at all times of the day, and I would write down dialogues or lines that I came up with. And this was mostly at a period of time where I only stayed home, like all the time, isolated, didn't have a social life, or went to school to do my mainly an English degree, which then I stopped doing for a psych degree. But the reason why I thought to compare daydreams to shadows was because as someone who fantasizes all the time and didn't invest in a social life as a young adult, I started to see the similarity between a daydream and something that is always in the back of your mind, this thing that lingers and follows you everywhere you go. You compare your real life to the fantasies that you made up. So I thought of a shadow because a shadow is always following you. And very specifically, this is what I did a lot in the Artist Muse, and I mentioned this in another video. I thought of the comparison that I wanted to make, and then after tried to study that object that I was comparing something to. I know I said it about the gargoyle complex. I thought, I like gargoyles. I'm going to research the details of what a gargoyle is and then compare it and translate it through an artistic lens. I did that with the shadows. I looked up like all that shadows are physically, and I kind of like artistically matched it up with the idea of a daydream. So there's certain lines, they linger, they follow. That's what we know about shadows. They follow you. To exist, a glimmer of hope has to shine down in order to cast a sincere outline whose shape derives from that which occupies space in reality. That's a mouthful. So shadows don't exist without light. And that's what the glimmer of hope is that's shining down. When you're a daydreamer, you're being very hopeful. You're fantasizing these awesome scenarios, these scenarios you wish were real. So that's the glimmer of hope is what's casting this outline of the daydream. It's making the shape that you're seeing. And whose unique shape derives from that which occupies space in reality. So in a sense, those shadows that you're creating, those daydreams, do occupy a space in reality because it's real to you. It's real in your mind. Other people don't see them, but you're able to make it real by writing it down, by having it affect your mood, things like that. So they do occupy a space in reality in that sense. They're projections captured between all we are made up of and a guiding light above. So daydreams really spawn from your life experiences, I think, and the person you are, your personality, everything that you are made up of is able to create that daydream and story. And also with what I like to call a guiding light above, that's what I use to say intuition. I think there's a mix of your own mind and divine intuition when you come up with stories or lines. And I say that because sometimes, and I would say the best lines that I've come up with come out of nowhere. And I see that as a guiding light above that's sending it to me, because I really don't have to consciously do much thinking when I come up with certain lines. I just feel like the stars above, whatever is watching me, and the warmth around me that is protecting me and always with me, whether you call it God, the universe, law of attraction, whatever, that guiding light above is helping make up the projections that are these daydream shadows. No matter how much we may want to reach out and physically touch them, they will always remain intangible entities that can only be felt with the imagination we each have. And that's kind of the bittersweet thing about daydreams. They're so awesome, and you can get so excited and wrapped up in your own head and have a really good time. But no matter what, you will never be able to physically touch them like a shadow. It's an intangible entity that can only be felt with the imagination we each have. You can't feel a shadow. You're going to have to use your imagination if you think that you're going to be able to feel a shadow. So it's the same as the daydreams. You can't physically feel them. They're in here. They're in here. So that's where this whole idea to compare a daydream to a shadow came from. That was all the details of it. And I'm really proud of this piece because of, where I was in my life when I read it to people, because it meant a lot to me. And I was really excited that day that I did the poetry slam. So that's one of my favorite pieces. The other piece that I read in the video that didn't finish recording is You've Made an Author Out of Me, which is very similar to Daydreams Are Shadows. It's all part of this whole theme in The Artist, the Muse, of imagination and creativity. So you've made an author out of me. She does not read for leisure. She reads to study, to learn, to quench a thirst for knowledge that constructs her entire outlook of reality. So when she couldn't find out anything about him, she was lost. I want to know who you are, what you are about, what you have been through, but you are way too hard to read. When I'm with you, you refrain your diction. When I'm not with you, there's no context. I have to use my own imagination to explain the content of your character. You're giving my mind way too much freedom to play around and cultivate false memories. This isn't your story anymore. It's mine. Don't you see what you have done? His disposition tightened and his jaw clenched. He was about to apologize when the sudden euphonious plot twist of her voice took him by surprise. You've made an author out of me, she smiled. Her eyes were fixed onto his with a firm stillness, but the shimmering of her tears created an illusion of movement. Under the influence of emotion, her pupils flickered, as if she were reading from left to right. So, you've made an author out of me, kind of similar to this whole daydreaming concept. It is about, and the first line I came up with when I wrote this, the entire piece was built around this one line that went through my head, and it was the line, "You are way too hard to read." Have you ever met somebody that's very interesting and mysterious, but you can't really figure out what they're feeling? They're too hard to read. It's hard to figure out how they feel about a situation or what they're thinking. There's very mysterious people, very interesting, complex people. So I remembered I knew someone who I just thought was very hard to read. And then I thought of this whole concept of somebody, and this is what I would do in life as a teenager, because I was such a chronic daydreamer. This person who's hard to read, it gives you way too much freedom to imagine who they could be, who they are behind the scenes, the things that you don't see. So that's where that line comes from. You're giving my mind way too much freedom to play around and cultivate false memories. You create a story about someone that you don't really know. And that's kind of creepy in real life. In the real world, that's like not really something you should do or at least talk about. There's people that are walking by that see me on my phone. that's like not something you should actively like speak about. Do it in your head. Don't really like speak about how you're making up this daydream about who this person is. But as a writer, as an artist, it's a really good thing to do. And that's why it's called You've Made an Author Out of Me. Because in a sense, when you daydream and then when you actually go and physically record those daydreams into dialogues and lines and put it into a story, this person that was so hard to read is the person that made you an author. So it's a very literal title. Let's go back to the beginning. She does not read for leisure. She reads to study, to learn, to quench a thirst for knowledge that constructs her entire outlook on reality. So when she couldn't find out anything about him, she was lost. So I matched that to something that I was doing a lot in my life at this time, where I was reading a lot of something that I've done for a long time now is I read nonfiction. So even though I like to write, I don't really like to read fiction. I don't like to read other people's stories. I like to read actual textbook stuff. Psychology, physics, quantum physics. I really get interested in textbooks. So I have so many textbooks that I've bought. That's where I was describing this author. She does not read for leisure. She reads to study. And I did go through this phase where I have a bunch of binders, and it matches up with the character in Touch. Oh, I'm using it to bolster up my camera. In my book In Touch, the main character studies a lot and he always wants to learn about things, and he has an entire shelf of binders for different topics. So I started doing that in my own life, and that's why I thought to write this as, you know, about someone who is really interested in studying and gaining knowledge, and that drive to gain knowledge and learn about the world is what drove them to be so intrigued by this person that they couldn't understand and couldn't, you know, study and get any actual information from. They had to resort to daydreaming about who this person might be. And then let's see, his disposition tightened, jaw clenched, to apologize. You've made an author out of me. She smiled. Her eyes were fixed on. I like this how it ends with how under the influence of her emotion, their pupils flickered as if she were reading from left to right. So in looking at this person and admitting to this person, you've literally made an author out of me because you're so mysterious. As she's making eye contact with him, it mirrors this whole idea of trying to read him, where her pupils go from left to right, like she's trying to read. You know, it's just kind of a really cool way to match up what she was mentally doing with how she is literally physically experiencing this person in front of her, trying to read them, doing the motion of trying to read them. So that's one of my favorite pieces that I've written. I really like these flash fiction pieces. Instead of calling them flash fiction on my website, I call them daydreams, because that's literally what they are. They're just these little blips of people and characters in very short daydreams that I like to record. So You've Made an Author Out of Me. It's about daydreaming, and it is a daydream. So it's interesting. If you want to see that on my website, go to the tab. There's a writing tab, and then daydreams. There's also poetry, essays, like research papers, things like that. All right, so that's as far as I got in the video that I made initially. So this will seem a little less premeditated. Now I'm gonna just spur of the moment find another one. Natural by Valerie Parente, and this is the picture that went with it. That was a fun painting to make because it was actually like a collage. The rose was separate pieces of paper that I had glued together, same with the leaves, all on canvas. So that was fun to make. Natural. I had no idea how much I cared until behaviors that I could not explain started kicking in. I started feeling without daydreaming. I started laughing without meaning. I started helping without intending. I started sacrificing without resenting. Did I say that right? Sorry. I started sacrificing without resenting. I do not force an emotion, but a natural force compels my mood. I do not intend to cry, but the tears begin to pool. I do not consciously try to think, but the sad thoughts venture through. I do not understand what is happening inside. I do not have a stance on what I cannot define. All I know is how much I care, with a new capacity I had no idea was there. Now I realize that this feeling came from nature's most beautiful miracle called love. Cheesy. written in 2017, August of 2017, so 3 years ago. Natural, if I'm remembering correctly, yeah, I know what I was doing at this time. Natural is when you care about someone enough to stop thinking about yourself and your own routine, and you go out of your way to help someone, really be selfless. That's where it comes from. I do not force an emotion, but a natural force compels my mood. You just feel driven to do good to this person. You want to help them. I do not intend to cry, but the tears begin to pool. It's just the raw, natural feeling of caring about someone. And that was a big deal in 2017 when I wrote it, because that's when I started to really have more of a social life and make more social connections. So prior to that was high school and the beginning of college, where I was purposefully isolating and daydreaming and trying to write stories, and I didn't make a social life my priority. I made my own internal world a priority, and that's why natural was so important at this time in August 2017. And I do remember what happened. The friends that I had made, we all went through a bit of a tough time, and I really wanted to help one of them. So this was just such an important part of my life, because it really taught me what it means to think outside of myself and not only be concerned in my needs but someone else's needs, and really go out of my way, really go spend a day to do something, do these chores and help this person at their house, rather than, well, I want to do my typical routine. I'm going to sit at home, drink coffee, write, all that. So it was a big deal, and it was called natural because that is, like it says at the end, nature's most beautiful miracle called love. That's where that feeling of wanting to help came from. It was feeling like love for someone and really caring about a friend. And that feeling feels so natural when you do feel it and feel that connection with someone. It's natural. At least for me it was. Let's see a little more. I do not force an emotion, but a natural force compels my mood. I already read that. I do not consciously try to think, but the sad thoughts venture through. I do not understand what is happening inside. I do not have a stance on what I cannot define. Yeah, I mean, I kind of already said it. It's just this weird experience when you've been isolating for so long and inside your own head and been such a daydreamer, to now have a social life and care about other people, not just the characters you've created, and not be so narcissistic, put other people first, really and truly want that. Not because you're trying or to compel your mood, trying to be a good person. It has nothing to do with that. There's no effort. It's just natural. The caring just comes naturally. And that's why it's titled that. So that video went on longer than I thought. I feel like that went by really fast, but it's 17 minutes, 18 now. We'll leave it at that because that's 3 poems, and I think 3 is a good amount for a video. And let's just talk about the artist, the Muse. I know you've heard me say it before, but I'll just reiterate that it is on Amazon. This one is only right now on paperback, not Kindle, just paperback on Amazon. And you can look it up by the artist, the Muse, and Valerie Parente. And this whole thing is about the artist becoming her own muse through her fantasies, her daydreams, as you saw in those past few poems. And, you know, how having a creative mind really plays into mental illness, care, you know, learning how to be an adult, things like that. And there are lots of pictures throughout it. Lots of pictures. So thank you. Feel free to look it up on Amazon. Have a good day. Bye.